The Soviet-Afghan War had entered its sixth year when the Central Intelligence Agency's most classified program intersected with battlefield reality in ways that would challenge every assumption about the nature of warfare, consciousness, and the tactical applications of human perception beyond the constraints of physical presence. Operation Cyclone, the largest covert operation in agency history, was pouring over $600 million annually into Afghan Mujahideen resistance efforts, but conventional intelligence gathering struggled to penetrate Soviet operational security in terrain where satellite reconnaissance could be defeated by cloud cover and human intelligence networks faced constant compromise. Deep within the Langley headquarters complex, a program that officially didn't exist was producing intelligence assessments that consistently exceeded the accuracy rates of conventional collection methods. Project Stargate, initiated in 1978 as a response to Soviet research into psychic phenomena for military applications, had evolved from academic curiosity into operational necessity as the Cold War's information warfare demands pushed intelligence services toward exploring every possible advantage, regardless of how unconventional the methodology appeared. The program's existence stemmed from intelligence reports suggesting that the Soviet Union was investing significant resources in parapsychological research through institutions like the Institute of Radio Engineering and Electronics in Moscow. Defense Intelligence Agency assessments indicated that Soviet scientists were conducting systematic studies of remote viewing, psychokinesis, and other phenomena that Western science generally dismissed as pseudoscientific, but which appeared to be yielding results that warranted serious strategic consideration. Dr. Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ's research at Stanford Research Institute had provided the theoretical foundation for what military planners termed psychoenergetic intelligence collection. Their controlled experiments with subjects like Uri Geller and Ingo Swann had demonstrated statistically significant results in describing distant locations and events without conventional sensory input, though the mechanisms underlying these abilities remained completely unexplained by established scientific understanding. By 1985, Project Stargate had recruited and trained a core group of remote viewers whose documented accuracy rates in laboratory conditions averaged between 60 and 70% for specific target identification tasks. Major Ed Dames, formerly of the 82nd Airborne Division, had developed training protocols that attempted to standardize remote viewing techniques into reproducible methodologies that could be taught to military personnel with appropriate psychological profiles and aptitude testing results. The remote viewing process, as refined through years of classified research, involved placing subjects in sensory isolation environments where they could focus consciousness beyond normal perceptual limitations. Viewers worked with coordinates or encrypted target designations that provided no conscious information about their intended focus, eliminating cognitive bias and expectation-based responses that could contaminate genuine psychic impressions with logical deduction or imagination. What made the Afghan deployment unique was the decision to test remote viewing capabilities in active combat zones where conventional intelligence methods faced operational limitations that created critical information gaps. Soviet forces in Afghanistan operated under communications security protocols that made signal intelligence difficult to acquire, while the mountainous terrain and hostile population made human intelligence networks extremely vulnerable to compromise and elimination. The specific operational challenge that led to remote viewer deployment involved a series of Soviet helicopter attacks that were consistently anticipating Mujahideen movements in the Helmand River Valley. Afghan resistance commanders reported that Soviet Mi-24 Hind gunships appeared to possess intelligence about guerrilla positions and supply routes that conventional reconnaissance couldn't explain, suggesting either advanced surveillance capabilities or intelligence penetration that resistance security measures hadn't identified. Captain James Morrison of the Defense Intelligence Agency's Special Activities Division had been tasked with establishing what official documentation termed an Enhanced Intelligence Collection Platform at Forward Operating Base. Charlie, a concealed facility positioned in terrain that provided observation capabilities across key transit routes used by both Soviet forces and Mujahideen supply convoys. The facility's official mission involved standard signals intelligence collection and battlefield damage assessment, but its classified component included the deployment of 2 remote viewers whose abilities had been validated through extensive testing at Fort Meade and other locations where Project Stargate conducted its most sensitive research. Staff Sergeant Patricia Chin and Specialist Michael Torres represented the program's most promising operational assets, individuals whose documented remote viewing accuracy consistently exceeded program averages. Local Afghan folklore provided an interesting cultural context for psychic phenomena, with traditional beliefs acknowledging the existence of individuals who possessed supernatural perception abilities. Village elders spoke of seers who could observe distant events through mystical means, while Islamic scholarly traditions included references to spiritual practices that enabled perception beyond normal human limitations, creating a cultural environment where remote viewing abilities might be accepted rather than dismissed as impossible. The terrain itself seemed to enhance certain perceptual phenomena. The electromagnetic properties of the Helmand region's mineral compositions created atmospheric conditions that some researchers theorized might facilitate the transmission of psychoenergetic information across distances that would normally prevent such communication. Ancient trade routes through the area had been selected based on geophysical characteristics that included unusual magnetic field variations and atmospheric ionization levels. As Captain Morrison's team prepared to conduct the first battlefield deployment of remote viewing assets in American military history, they carried equipment that represented the intersection of cutting-edge technology and consciousness research that challenged every conventional assumption about the nature of warfare and human perception capabilities. Forward Operating Base. Charlie occupied a position that had been selected through conventional military analysis, but which possessed characteristics that Project Stargate researchers considered optimal for psychoenergetic operations. Located at 2,400 meters elevation in a natural depression between 2 ridgelines, the facility provided electromagnetic shielding from atmospheric interference while maintaining line-of-sight communications with intelligence collection platforms positioned throughout the Helmand Valley. The base's official complement included 12 personnel from the Defense Intelligence Agency's 513 Military Intelligence Battalion, specialists in signals interception and battlefield reconnaissance whose cover identities provided operational security for the remote viewing program's true mission parameters. Captain Morrison's team had been briefed that their presence supported experimental intelligence collection methodologies, without receiving specific details about the nature of psychic research or the theoretical foundations underlying remote viewing capabilities. Staff Sergeant Patricia Chin arrived at the facility with credentials that identified her as a communications intelligence analyst, but her actual background included 3 years of intensive training in coordinate remote viewing protocols developed at Fort Meade under the supervision of Major Ed Dames and civilian contractors whose security clearances exceeded those of most senior military officers. Her documented accuracy rates in laboratory conditions consistently reached 73% for specific target identification tasks. Specialist Michael Torres carried qualifications in electronic warfare systems analysis, though his primary expertise involved what Project Stargate researchers termed controlled remote viewing, a systematic methodology that attempted to eliminate subconscious analytical processes that could contaminate genuine psychic impressions with logical deduction or imagination. His success rates averaged 68% across multiple target categories, with particular strength in perceiving structural details and personnel movements. The remote viewing equipment deployed to Forward Operating Base Charlie represented the most advanced technology available for consciousness research applications. Sensory isolation chambers constructed from specialized materials that blocked electromagnetic interference created environments where viewers could focus their awareness beyond normal perceptual limitations without distraction from environmental stimuli. Digital recording systems captured every aspect of viewing sessions for later analysis by researchers at Langley, who specialized in extracting actionable intelligence from psychic impressions. Target designation protocols followed security procedures that prevented conscious knowledge contamination of remote viewing results. Coordinates or encrypted reference numbers provided no logical information about intended focus areas, while double-blind methodologies ensured that session monitors couldn't unconsciously influence viewer responses through verbal or physical cues that might suggest desired outcomes. The operational challenge that necessitated remote viewing deployment involved Soviet helicopter operations that demonstrated intelligence capabilities beyond what conventional reconnaissance methods could explain. Mi-24 Hind gunships were conducting precision strikes against Mujahideen positions with accuracy that suggested real-time intelligence about resistance movements, weapons caches, and supply route utilization that neither signals interception nor human intelligence networks could account for. Afghan resistance commanders in the region had reported multiple incidents where Soviet forces appeared to possess advanced knowledge of guerrilla operations that should have been completely secure from external observation. Weapons convoys traveling along routes that had never been used previously were being intercepted with precision that indicated detailed knowledge of timing, cargo contents, and personnel assignments that resistance security protocols should have prevented from reaching enemy intelligence services. More disturbing was evidence suggesting that Soviet forces were anticipating Mujahideen tactical responses to their own operations, adjusting assault patterns and deployment schedules in ways that neutralized resistance countermeasures before they could be implemented. This implied intelligence penetration at levels that conventional counterintelligence investigations had failed to identify, raising possibilities that Soviet capabilities extended beyond traditional collection methods. Captain Morrison's mission briefing had emphasized the experimental nature of their deployment while maintaining operational security regarding the specific capabilities being tested. His orders specified that remote viewing assets would attempt to identify Soviet operational planning, troop movements, and logistical vulnerabilities that conventional intelligence collection couldn't access, providing tactical advantages that could enhance Mujahideen effectiveness against helicopter operations. The facility's communication systems included both standard military radio equipment and specialized transmission devices designed for reporting remote viewing results through channels that bypassed normal intelligence distribution networks. All psychic intelligence would be transmitted directly to Project Stargate analysts at Langley for evaluation and potential integration with conventional intelligence assessments before reaching operational commanders. Environmental conditions in the Helmand region provided both advantages and challenges for remote viewing operations. The high altitude and minimal atmospheric pollution created electromagnetic clarity that some researchers theorized might enhance psychoenergetic transmission, while the extreme temperature variations and low humidity levels required careful attention to physiological factors that could affect consciousness focus and perceptual accuracy. Local cultural factors presented unique considerations for operational security. Afghan religious traditions included acknowledgement of supernatural perception abilities, while tribal folklore contained numerous references to individuals who possessed what Western terminology would classify as psychic capabilities. This cultural acceptance meant that remote viewing activities might encounter less skepticism than similar operations in regions where such phenomena were automatically dismissed as impossible. The initial operational test would involve using remote viewing to identify Soviet helicopter maintenance facilities and logistical support infrastructure that conventional reconnaissance had been unable to locate despite extensive aerial and human intelligence collection efforts. Success in this preliminary mission would determine whether psychic intelligence capabilities warranted expanded deployment in active combat zones where conventional methods had reached their operational limitations. The first remote viewing session commenced at 0830 hours on March 16th, with Staff Sergeant Chin positioned in the sensory isolation chamber, while Specialist Torres monitored biometric readings and session protocols from the adjacent control room. The target designation consisted of an 8-digit coordinate reference that provided no conscious information about the intended focus area, following double-blind procedures that prevented analytical contamination of genuine psychic impressions. Captain Morrison observed the session through closed-circuit monitoring systems while maintaining radio contact with intelligence analysts at Langley, who would evaluate the remote viewing results against conventional intelligence assessments. The session's stated objective involved identifying Soviet helicopter operations infrastructure within a 50-kilometer radius of known flight patterns, but the true test would determine whether psychic intelligence could penetrate operational security that had defeated every other collection method. Chin's initial impressions, recorded through digital audio systems for later transcription and analysis, described terrain features that corresponded accurately to known geographical characteristics of the target region. Her descriptions included elevation variations, vegetation patterns, and hydrological features that matched satellite reconnaissance data, suggesting that her consciousness had successfully focused on the intended coordinates despite having no conventional knowledge of the location. However, as the session progressed beyond geographical observations, Chin began reporting perceptual information that challenged conventional understanding of the battlefield environment. She described electromagnetic patterns that don't match natural phenomena, and artificial structures that appear to be underground but somehow project influence above surface level. Her biometric readings remained within normal parameters for remote viewing sessions, indicating genuine psychic perception rather than imagination or analytical deduction. More disturbing were Chin's reports of presence awareness, the sensation that her psychic observation was being detected by consciousness entities at the target location. She described feeling watched by intelligences that seemed to recognize her remote presence and were actively attempting to influence her perceptions through what she termed cognitive interference patterns that resembled deliberate misinformation rather than natural psychic static. Specialist Torres, monitoring the session from his position in the control room, detected electromagnetic anomalies in the facility's sensitive instrumentation that seemed to correlate with Chin's reports of interference. Equipment that had functioned normally during laboratory sessions at Fort Meade was registering fluctuations that suggested external electromagnetic influences despite the chamber's sophisticated shielding systems designed to prevent such contamination. The session concluded after 47 minutes when Chin reported overwhelming presence contact that made continued observation impossible without risking psychological disruption. Her final impressions included coordinates for what she described as a facility that exists in dimensions beyond normal geography, and warnings about reciprocal observation capabilities that suggested the target of her remote viewing possessed the ability to observe her in return. Analysis of Chin's session recordings revealed information that corresponded with intelligence fragments gathered through conventional methods, but also included details that no other collection source had identified. Her descriptions of underground structures matched geological surveys that indicated natural cave formations in the target area, but her reports of artificial modifications to these formations provided new intelligence about potential Soviet facility construction that warranted further investigation. More significantly, Chin had provided specific coordinates for what she described as the source of the electromagnetic interference, a location that conventional reconnaissance had identified as barren terrain, but which her remote viewing suggested contained concealed infrastructure of unusual design and purpose. The coordinates placed this facility approximately 37 kilometers southeast of known Soviet helicopter operating bases, Captain Morrison authorized a second remote viewing session using specialist Torres to verify Chin's observations and provide additional details about the suspected Soviet facility. However, Torres's session produced results that raised more questions than answers about the nature of what they were investigating and the capabilities of whoever was operating from the concealed location. Torres reported immediate detection of organized consciousness at the target coordinates. Not individual human awareness, but what he described as collective intelligence that operates through systematic methods. His impressions suggested that the facility contained personnel who possessed remote viewing capabilities that exceeded Project Stargate's documented performance levels, individuals who were conducting their own psychic reconnaissance operations against American and Mujahideen forces throughout the region. The implications were staggering. If Torres's remote viewing was accurate, the Soviet Union had not only developed psychic intelligence capabilities, but had deployed them operationally in Afghanistan with such effectiveness that they were providing real-time tactical intelligence about resistance movements. This would explain the mysterious accuracy of Soviet helicopter operations and suggest that the Cold War's intelligence competition had expanded into dimensions that challenge every assumption about the nature of human consciousness and its military applications. Both remote viewers reported similar experiences of defensive interference during their sessions, psychological pressure that seemed designed to prevent successful observation of the target facility. This suggested that Soviet remote viewing operations included countermeasures specifically intended to defeat American psychic intelligence collection, indicating a level of operational sophistication that implied years of research and development in parapsychological warfare applications. Local atmospheric conditions began displaying anomalies that correlated with the remote viewing sessions. Electromagnetic sensors positioned around forward operating base, Charlie detected interference patterns that intensified during psychic operations and continued for several hours afterward, as if the consciousness-focused activities were triggering responses in the physical environment that persisted beyond the actual viewing sessions. Afghan personnel working with the American intelligence team reported unusual dreams and perceptual experiences that began shortly after the remote viewing operations commenced. Local interpreters described visions of distant places and conversations in Russian that they couldn't understand but somehow recognized as relating to military operations, suggesting that psychic activities at the base were creating consciousness effects that extended beyond the intended participants. At 13:47 hours on March 18th, during Specialist Torres's third remote viewing session targeting the suspected Soviet facility, Project Stargate encountered its first documented case of direct psychic confrontation between opposing intelligence assets. Torres had been conducting routine reconnaissance of the underground complex when his biometric readings suddenly spiked to levels that indicated extreme psychological stress despite his apparent calm physical state within the isolation chamber. The session monitor, Sergeant First Class David Kim, immediately recognized that Torres was experiencing something beyond normal remote viewing phenomena when the specialist began speaking in fluent Russian despite having no documented knowledge of the language. His vocalizations weren't random words, but structured sentences that contained technical terminology related to psychoenergetic research and military applications, suggesting that external intelligence was somehow communicating through his consciousness. Captain Morrison authorized emergency session termination protocols, but Torres remained locked in what appeared to be direct communication with entities at the target location. His Russian language responses indicated participation in a conversation where he was being questioned about American remote viewing capabilities, training methodologies, and operational deployment strategies. The interrogation was being conducted by individuals who possessed intimate knowledge of Project Stargate's classified research programs. Staff Sergeant Chen, monitoring from the adjacent control room, reported simultaneous psychic contact with the same consciousness entities that were engaging Torres. Her experience differed in that she maintained awareness of her location and identity, while Torres appeared to be completely absorbed in the remote interaction. Chin described multiple organized intelligences working in coordination to extract information from American remote viewers while simultaneously attempting to implant false intelligence about Soviet operations. The facility's electromagnetic monitoring equipment registered interference patterns that exceeded anything previously recorded during remote viewing operations. Sensitive instrumentation designed to detect minute changes in local electromagnetic fields was displaying readings that indicated massive energy expenditures originating from the direction of the Soviet facility coordinates. The interference was so intense that it began affecting communications equipment and electronic systems throughout Forward Operating Base Charlie. More alarming was the discovery that the psychic confrontation was being observed by intelligence entities beyond the immediate participants. Chin reported awareness of additional consciousness presences that seemed to be monitoring the American-Soviet remote viewing engagement for purposes that remained unclear. These observers possessed capabilities that exceeded both American and Soviet remote viewing assets, suggesting involvement by organizations or entities whose psychic research had achieved levels of development that neither superpower had documented. Torres's interrogation continued for 23 minutes before the Soviet remote viewers apparently realized they were being monitored by the additional consciousness entities. The Russian language dialogue shifted from information extraction to what Chin described as emergency communication protocols that indicated the Soviet psychic operatives were as surprised by the third-party observation as the American team had been. When Torres finally emerged from the remote contact, his debriefing revealed intelligence that fundamentally altered American understanding of Soviet psychic warfare capabilities. The underground facility contained approximately 40 remote viewers working in coordinated teams to provide real-time tactical intelligence about resistance movements throughout Afghanistan. Their operational methods included not only passive observation, but active psychological influence operations designed to affect Mujahideen decision-making and morale. The Soviet remote viewing program, according to information extracted during the psychic confrontation, had been operational since 1979 and was producing intelligence assessments that consistently exceeded conventional collection methods in accuracy and detail. Their success rates averaged 85% for tactical reconnaissance missions, significantly higher than Project Stargate's documented performance levels, suggesting training methodologies or enhancement techniques that American research hadn't developed. More disturbing was Torres's report that the Soviet remote viewers possessed capabilities that extended beyond passive observation into active psychokinetic influence. They could affect electronic systems at distances exceeding 200 kilometers, manipulate probability patterns to influence tactical outcomes, and conduct what they termed consciousness warfare against enemy personnel to create confusion, fear, and decision-making impairment that provided strategic advantages. The interrogation had also revealed that Soviet psychic operations included remote viewing of American facilities, including detailed intelligence about Project Stargate's research locations, personnel assignments, and operational capabilities. The underground complex in Afghanistan served as both a tactical intelligence center and a training facility where Soviet remote viewers practiced techniques for penetrating American psychic defenses and extracting classified information from distance. Captain Morrison's emergency communication with Langley confirmed that similar psychic confrontations were being reported by Project Stargate assets at other locations. Remote viewers operating in Central America, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe were encountering organized resistance from what appeared to be Soviet consciousness operatives conducting systematic intelligence collection against American psychic warfare programs. The implications extended far beyond tactical intelligence gathering. If Soviet remote viewing capabilities included active psychological influence operations, they possessed weapons that could affect military decision-making, civilian morale, and political stability in ways that conventional warfare couldn't achieve. The Cold War had evolved into a conflict where consciousness itself had become a battlefield where victory or defeat might be determined by capabilities that most political and military leaders didn't know existed. Analysis of electromagnetic recordings from the psychic confrontation revealed patterns that suggested the consciousness interaction had triggered responses in local atmospheric conditions. Barometric pressure readings showed fluctuations that correlated with specific moments in the remote viewing engagement, while seismic instruments detected vibrations that appeared to originate from underground sources despite the absence of geological activity that could account for such phenomena. The session concluded with both American remote viewers reporting that the Soviet consciousness operatives had transmitted what appeared to be a direct warning. Future American psychic reconnaissance in the region would encounter increasingly aggressive countermeasures, and Project Stargate personnel should expect psychic attacks designed to cause psychological damage that could permanently impair their remote viewing capabilities. The Soviet response manifested at 02:43 hours on March 20th, as Staff Sergeant Chin attempted to conduct routine reconnaissance of Mujahideen supply routes that Soviet helicopter operations had been mysteriously interdicting. Within minutes of session commencement, her biometric readings indicated severe psychological distress despite her apparent physical calm within the isolation chamber. What began as standard remote viewing rapidly escalated into the most intense psychic warfare engagement documented in Project Stargate's operational history. Chin reported immediate contact with organized consciousness entities that she described as working in formation like a military unit to overwhelm her remote viewing session through coordinated psychological pressure. Unlike the interrogation techniques encountered during Torres's previous session, this represented active assault designed to cause permanent damage to her psychic capabilities through what Soviet remote viewers termed consciousness fragmentation protocols. The attack manifested as simultaneous intrusion from multiple Soviet remote viewers who were attempting to force Chin's awareness into what she described as psychological mazes designed to trap consciousness in artificial reality constructs. Each maze contained scenarios based on her personal fears and psychological vulnerabilities, extracted from her mind during the intrusion and weaponized against her ability to maintain coherent perception of actual remote viewing targets. Specialist Torres, monitoring from the control room, detected that the psychic assault was affecting facility electronics in ways that suggested Soviet remote viewers possessed psychokinetic capabilities beyond anything documented in American research. Sensitive instrumentation was displaying impossible readings, while communications equipment experienced systematic failures that followed patterns indicating deliberate technological sabotage conducted through consciousness manipulation of electromagnetic fields. Overriding, Captain Morrison authorized emergency intervention protocols that included attempts to establish protective psychic barriers around Chen's consciousness while she remained engaged in the Soviet attack. However, Project Stargate's defensive methodologies proved inadequate against assault techniques that demonstrated years of development in what appeared to be systematic research into consciousness warfare applications designed specifically to defeat American remote viewing capabilities. The electromagnetic disruption intensified to levels that began affecting personnel throughout Forward Operating Base Charlie, who had no direct involvement in remote viewing operations. Communications specialists reported equipment malfunctions that followed patterns suggesting external control, while security personnel experienced what the base medic diagnosed as mass psychological disturbance, characterized by anxiety, disorientation, and sensory hallucinations that persisted for hours after exposure. More alarming was the discovery that the Soviet psychic assault was somehow accessing classified information from Chin's memory and transmitting it back to the underground facility in real time. Intelligence assessments later confirmed that sensitive details about Project Stargate's research methodologies, personnel assignments, and operational capabilities were being extracted during the attack and integrated into Soviet understanding of American psychic warfare programs. Chen's attempts to withdraw from the remote viewing session encountered active resistance from Soviet consciousness operatives who appeared determined to maintain psychic contact until they had achieved their intelligence extraction objectives or caused permanent psychological damage that would eliminate her as an operational asset. Her reports described being held in place by organized willpower that prevented normal session termination procedures from functioning effectively. The confrontation escalated when the mysterious third-party consciousness entities that had observed previous sessions intervened in the Soviet assault. Chen reported that additional intelligences with capabilities exceeding both American and Soviet remote viewers had engaged the attacking operatives in what she described as psychic combat at levels beyond human understanding. The intervention created psychological space that allowed her to attempt escape from the Soviet consciousness traps. Environmental effects of the psychic warfare extended beyond the immediate facility to impact local atmospheric conditions in ways that challenged meteorological understanding. Temperature readings throughout the region displayed fluctuations that correlated with specific moments in the consciousness conflict, while electromagnetic sensors detected interference patterns that suggested the battle was generating effects in physical reality that persisted across distances of several kilometers. Afghan personnel at the base reported collective dreams that contained detailed visions of the underground Soviet facility and the remote viewing operations being conducted there. Local interpreters described observing Soviet consciousness operatives working in specialized chambers while being supervised by individuals whose capabilities appeared to exceed normal human psychic potential, suggesting involvement by entities whose origins remained unclear. The psychic combat reached its peak when Chen reported that the third-party consciousness entities had successfully disrupted the Soviet assault, but at the cost of revealing their own operational capabilities to both American and Soviet remote viewers. The intervention had exposed the existence of psychic warfare assets that operated beyond the control of either superpower and possessed technologies or abilities that neither Project Stargate nor Soviet research had achieved. Torres, monitoring the electromagnetic effects of the consciousness battle, detected patterns that suggested the conflict was being observed and recorded by intelligence entities using methods that exceeded conventional surveillance capabilities. The realization that their psychic warfare engagement was itself the target of reconnaissance by unknown observers added another layer of complexity to operational security considerations that hadn't been anticipated in Project Stargate's planning. When Chen finally achieved extraction from the Soviet consciousness assault, her debriefing revealed intelligence that fundamentally altered American understanding of the psychic warfare battlefield. The underground facility contained not only Soviet remote viewers, but personnel whose capabilities suggested enhancement through techniques or technologies that human research hadn't developed. These individuals were conducting consciousness operations that extended far beyond intelligence gathering into active manipulation of physical reality through psychokinetic influence. The session's conclusion left Chen with psychological damage that military medical personnel couldn't explain or treat through conventional methods. Her remote viewing accuracy rates had been permanently reduced, while she reported ongoing awareness of Soviet consciousness operatives who continued to monitor her activities despite the termination of direct psychic contact. The assault had created lasting connections that appeared to provide Soviet intelligence with continuing access to her perceptions and memories. The immediate evacuation of forward operating base. Charlie commenced at 0800 hours on March 21st, following Captain Morrison's determination that continued operations at the facility posed unacceptable risks to personnel safety and operational security. The electromagnetic anomalies generated by the psychic warfare engagement had rendered sensitive intelligence equipment unreliable, while the ongoing psychological effects on base personnel created conditions that compromised mission effectiveness and threatened long-term mental health stability. Staff Sergeant Chen required medical evacuation to specialized facilities at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, where military psychologists with security clearances for Project Stargate could attempt treatment for psychological trauma that exceeded conventional understanding of combat stress disorders. Her symptoms included persistent awareness of external consciousness presence, involuntary remote viewing episodes that she couldn't control or terminate, and memory fragmentation that suggested ongoing interference from Soviet psychic operatives. Specialist Torres demonstrated more resilience to the psychological effects of psychic warfare, but reported fundamental changes in his remote viewing capabilities that intelligence analysts considered both advantageous and concerning. His accuracy rates had increased dramatically, reaching 92% in post-incident testing, but he also exhibited awareness of consciousness entities beyond normal human perception that raised questions about the nature of whatever had enhanced his abilities during the Soviet confrontation. The electromagnetic recordings from the psychic warfare engagement required analysis by specialists whose expertise extended beyond conventional physics into theoretical frameworks that most academic institutions didn't acknowledge as legitimate scientific research. Dr. Harold Puthoff's team at Stanford Research Institute confirmed that the electromagnetic patterns contained signatures that suggested manipulation of fundamental physical constants through consciousness-directed influence, implying capabilities that challenged basic assumptions about the relationship between mind and matter. Intelligence assessment of information extracted from the Soviet consciousness assault revealed operational details about psychic warfare programs that extended far beyond Afghanistan deployment. The underground facility represented one node in a global network of remote viewing operations that provided the Soviet Union with intelligence capabilities that conventional collection methods couldn't match or counter. Their psychic assets were conducting reconnaissance of American military installations, political leadership activities, and research programs with accuracy levels that compromised virtually every aspect of national security planning. More disturbing was evidence suggesting that Soviet remote viewing operations included active psychological influence campaigns designed to affect decision-making by American political and military leadership without their awareness of external manipulation. The consciousness warfare capabilities demonstrated during the Afghanistan engagement represented tactical applications of strategic programs that could influence election outcomes, policy decisions, and military operations through subtle psychological pressure that targeted individuals wouldn't recognize as foreign interference. The third-party consciousness entities that had intervened in the Soviet assault remained an intelligence puzzle that challenged every framework for understanding the psychic warfare battlefield. Analysis of their demonstrated capabilities suggested technological or biological enhancement that exceeded both American and Soviet research achievements, raising possibilities that included extraterrestrial involvement, advanced terrestrial civilizations, or breakthrough developments in consciousness research that neither superpower had achieved. Local effects of the psychic warfare extended throughout the Helmand region in ways that suggested consciousness conflicts could trigger environmental changes across geographical areas that encompassed thousands of square kilometers. Meteorological stations recorded atmospheric anomalies that persisted for weeks after the engagement, while seismic instruments detected subsurface activity that geological surveys couldn't explain through conventional tectonic processes. Afghan resistance commanders reported fundamental changes in Soviet helicopter operations following the psychic warfare engagement, suggesting that the consciousness battle had disrupted intelligence capabilities that the underground facility had been providing to tactical forces. Helicopter interception rates of Mujahideen supply convoys decreased significantly, while Soviet forces appeared to have lost the mysterious tactical advantages that had characterized their operations throughout the previous 6 months. However, the operational victory came at costs that extended beyond the immediate personnel casualties. Project Stargate's security had been comprehensively compromised through Soviet consciousness extraction of classified information, requiring complete restructuring of research programs and operational methodologies to prevent further intelligence losses. The psychological damage to remote viewing assets represented irreplaceable human resources whose training had required years of development. Captain Morrison's final intelligence assessment for transmission to Langley included recommendations that fundamentally challenged American approaches to psychic warfare research and deployment. The engagement had demonstrated that consciousness conflicts operated according to principles that conventional military doctrine couldn't address, while the involvement of unknown third-party entities suggested that neither superpower possessed comprehensive understanding of the psychic warfare battlefield. The electromagnetic effects of the consciousness battle had been detected by sensitive monitoring equipment at distances exceeding 400 kilometers from forward operating base Charlie, indicating that psychic warfare generated signatures that could be tracked through technological methods despite the non-physical nature of consciousness interaction. This implied that future operations would require consideration of detectability factors that Project Stargate's planning had never addressed. Personnel debriefing sessions revealed that the psychological effects of psychic warfare exposure extended beyond the immediate participants to affect individuals who had no direct involvement in remote viewing operations. Base support staff reported enhanced intuitive capabilities, spontaneous precognitive experiences, and awareness of distant events that suggested consciousness effects could propagate through proximity to psychic warfare activities without deliberate transmission or reception. The facility's abandonment left behind monitoring equipment that continued recording electromagnetic anomalies for several months after personnel evacuation, suggesting that consciousness warfare could create lasting effects in physical environments that persisted long after the actual psychic engagement had concluded. These environmental changes appeared to enhance conditions for future psychic activities while also creating signatures that could be detected by appropriately sensitive instrumentation. Within 72 hours of forward operating base Charlie's evacuation, Project Stargate underwent systematic restructuring that effectively eliminated all documentation of psychic warfare capabilities while maintaining the program's basic research functions under enhanced security protocols. The Defense Intelligence Agency classified the Afghanistan deployment under compartmented access restrictions that exceeded those applied to nuclear weapons research, ensuring that knowledge of consciousness warfare operations remained confined to fewer than 30 individuals across the entire intelligence community. Staff Sergeant Patricia Chin's medical treatment at specialized facilities required development of therapeutic approaches that conventional military psychiatry couldn't provide, leading to collaboration with civilian researchers whose expertise in consciousness studies had been acquired through decades of work that officially didn't exist. Her case became the foundation for protocols addressing psychological trauma from psychic warfare that would remain classified for the next 40 years, though similar symptoms would be reported by intelligence personnel in conflicts throughout the Cold War's final decade. Specialist Michael Torres received reassignment to research positions at Fort Meade, where his enhanced remote viewing capabilities could be studied while maintaining operational security that prevented Soviet intelligence from accessing his consciousness through the connections established during the Afghanistan engagement. His documented accuracy rates continued to exceed Project Stargate's previous performance standards, but his reports of ongoing contact with unknown consciousness entities raised concerns about psychological stability that required continuous monitoring. The electromagnetic recordings from the psychic warfare confrontation were transferred to analysis teams whose theoretical frameworks incorporated physics research that mainstream academic institutions considered too speculative for serious consideration. Dr. Hal Puthoff's continued collaboration with Project Stargate included investigation of zero-point energy fluctuations that appeared to be influenced by consciousness-directed intention, suggesting applications that could revolutionize both psychic research and fundamental physics understanding. Intelligence assessment of the Soviet psychic warfare program's capabilities led to defensive measures that included psychological screening of American political and military leadership for evidence of external consciousness influence. The discovery that remote viewing operations could extract classified information directly from human memory without the target's awareness required security protocols that addressed threats beyond conventional counterintelligence considerations. The third-party consciousness entities that had intervened in the Soviet assault became the subject of analysis that extended Project Stargate's research into areas that challenged assumptions about the nature of intelligence itself. Evidence suggesting non-human involvement in psychic warfare activities led to investigation protocols that overlapped with other classified programs addressing aerial phenomena and technological capabilities that exceeded known terrestrial development. Congressional oversight of Project Stargate's expanded activities remained limited to Intelligence Committee members, whose security clearances included compartmented access to consciousness warfare research. Public disclosure of psychic warfare capabilities was considered a threat to national security that warranted extreme measures to prevent unauthorized information release, including disinformation campaigns designed to discredit legitimate research through association with fraudulent claims and entertainment media portrayals. The underground Soviet facility in Afghanistan continued operations throughout the remainder of the Soviet-Afghan War, but intelligence indicated that their psychic warfare program had been fundamentally altered by the consciousness battle with American remote viewers. Soviet capabilities appeared to have been enhanced through whatever contact they had established with the unknown third-party entities, creating advantages that conventional American intelligence methods couldn't assess or counter. Local Afghan folklore evolved to incorporate accounts of the psychic warfare engagement, though traditional stories interpreted the events through spiritual frameworks that predated modern understanding of consciousness research. Village elders spoke of battles between jinn that had disturbed the boundary between spiritual and physical realms, creating conditions where ordinary perception could access awareness beyond normal human limitations. The electromagnetic anomalies recorded during the consciousness battle continued to manifest in the Helmand region for several years after the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, creating environmental conditions that enhanced psychic phenomena for individuals with appropriate sensitivity or training. These effects attracted researchers from various nations whose interest in consciousness warfare had been stimulated by intelligence reports of the American-Soviet psychic confrontation. By 1987, Project Stargate had evolved into a research program that officially focused on basic parapsychological investigation while maintaining classified operational capabilities that included defensive measures against foreign consciousness warfare and limited offensive applications that remained under strict political control. The Afghanistan deployment was never officially acknowledged, though intelligence personnel with appropriate clearances recognized its significance as the first documented case of psychic warfare between major powers.